Hi everyone. As the current ladder season's looking to finish up with a potential new patch on the horizon, I wanted to go through some potential tweaks for the Bowazon, in part inspired by Macro's video on his take on the Amazon changes. In this video, I'll cover my suggestions around skills and build diversity, quality of life and itemization aspects of the Bowazon experience, as well as fixes to some of the more annoying bugs in the game. Starting with skills. For the Amazon skills, I'm going to piggyback a bit on the proposed changes by Macro Boy while overlaying my suggestions on top of that. Starting with the bow skill tree, the fire and cold arrow skills, I think the way that they currently work are fine, where the more skill points you invest, the more physical damage conversion to the respective element they get, while still retaining its physical damage so that you can continue to leech mana back. That said, they are underutilized skills and deserve a buff to make them more attractive options to use. For this, I think adding more flat damage to both fire and cold arrow skills will make them more viable for gunning down bosses, especially for elemental Bowazons that might not have high physical damage. This also goes some small way towards helping Bowazons with their struggles against larger, single target enemies. Multi-shot, while works very well and arguably did not need a new synergy in 2.4, is a skill that can't be freely maxed out due to the 24 arrow hard cap on the skill, while at the same time the mana cost keeps going up, creating this weird disincentive to max out the skill. So to address this, my suggestion is to add a 20% enhanced damage per level buff to multi-shot for skill levels 24 and above, which is after skill level 23 that hits the max arrow cap. This way, your maximum number of arrows still don't increase, but your damage on each arrow does. For Exploding Arrow, the skill is quite good for speedrunning a Bowazon through Normal and Nightmare, but starts to be underwhelming at higher levels and gets vastly outperformed by Freezing Arrow in the late game. A small buff to Exploding Arrow's explosion damage is warranted, to stand out a little bit from Freezing Arrow, considering that Freezing Arrow also freezes. For Ice Arrow, this is a skill that sees no usage once you get Freezing Arrow, as Freezing Arrow outperforms Ice Arrow in every single way. While it would be hard to create meaningful differentiation between the two single target Cold Arrow skills, I think making Ice Arrow have an always hits property instead of needing lots of attack rating will at least make this a more reliable skill to hit and freeze targets with. This may especially come in handy in a single playthrough setting. A small damage boost on top of this will not hurt as well. The Immolation Arrow skill is currently in a weird place right now. It does a little more damage than Exploding Arrow, but has a casting delay of 0.6 seconds. With the amount of comments I've seen people say the casting delay should be removed altogether, this might come off as controversial, but my suggestion for Immolation Arrow is to actually increase the casting delay to 2 seconds, but in return significantly buff Immolation Arrow's explosion damage, burning damage, as well as introduce a modest increase to its area of effect. This change will do a few things for Immolation Arrow. Firstly, it will create two firebow skills that any Bowazon can alternate between, using Exploding Arrow as a staple skill, with the occasional firing of Immolation Arrow as a skill shot, or creating a DPS spike every few shots. This change would also make Immolation Arrow a great skill to kite with, or for shoot and get behind cover type play. This would also help complement Fire Arrow in taking down single targets without outright making Fire Arrow or Exploding Arrow useless skills. And lastly, this buff will make Immolation Arrow a good skill to use more generally when paired with Freezing Arrow to freeze targets in their place, followed by hitting them with a carefully placed high damaging Immolation Arrow. Next for the passive and magic skill tree. Penetrate is a great skill to have before using Faith to help your overall chance to hit. In practice, while it does its job, Penetrate in most circumstances requires a player to almost max this skill out to ensure 95% chance to hit with their attacks. This is even after placing all points into dexterity and getting lots of sharp grand charms. Penetrate doesn't need a change in how it works, but making each skill level add more attack rating will go to some lengths to make sure that this skill doesn't need to be maxed out, allowing the Bowazon to utilize other skills, especially as she is making her way through hell. Apart from that, I think the rest of the passives are fine in how they work, though there's one aspect of Amazons that needs addressing in my opinion, which is that they're the only melee or physical damage dealing character that doesn't have a speed boost from their skills or any sort of movement-based skill whatsoever. Assassins have boosted speed and dragonflight, barbarians have increased speed, leap and frenzy, paladins have vigor and charge, and druids have werewolf and feral rage. Heck, even sorceresses have blaze that allows them to run faster, even though she primarily gets around using teleport. It would be great to introduce a small movement speed bonus somewhere for the Amazon. I think the best place for this would be in the evade skill, where each skill level grants 2% increased speed. And lastly, for the passive and magic tree, Valkyrie is always going to be a great skill to have for a Bowazon. Macro suggested to remove some of the existing passive synergies for Valkyrie in favour of new synergies with skills from the spear skill tree to add additional damage. I think a damage synergy would be a great addition to the Valkyrie, though I think the current synergies should also stay in place as well to keep your options open in how you choose to tailor your Valkyrie skill. The proposed quality of life changes are centered around arrow and bolt management. I don't mind the D2 arrow and bolts mechanic, and having 500 arrows and bolts per quiver is a welcome change in patch 2.4. There are, however, a couple of additional things that would make this experience a little bit better. Arrows and bolts should drop closer to their maximum quantities. This can be done by ensuring that all quivers dropped from monsters or the environment roll a higher minimum number of arrows or bolts per quiver. I unfortunately haven't been able to find out how the game decides how many arrows and bolts drop per quiver, but I think there might be an opportunity there to increase the number of arrows or bolts dropped without increasing the number of quivers dropped overall. I certainly know there have been times where I've picked up arrows and it still didn't top me up. For NPCs that offer repairing, the Repair All button should also fully restock arrows and bolts if they are equipped in either the primary or secondary weapon slots. Currently right now, I have to push the Repair All button and then have to sell my arrows and buy new arrows to top myself up again. It would be great if all of these things can be done with a single push of a button at any NPC that offers repairing services without the need to fiddle around with arrows on each top-up round. No other class has to go through the pain of sorting through arrows or bolts, so I think this change only makes sense. And now for itemization. Crossbows in Diablo 2 have always suffered from being a second-class weapon type for Bowazons. One of the main things holding back crossbows is the 11 frame attack speed cap, which translates to a top attack speed of 2.27 attacks per second, whereas for bows, that top attack speed is 3.57 attacks per second. It's really a big difference and results in crossbows lagging behind in final damage per second numbers that they can crank out. To help counteract this, base damages on all crossbow bases should be bumped up to give them that extra firepower. Maybe 5 base damage points would be a sensible level across the board for elite crossbows. The damage numbers of all elite crossbows can look like as shown on screen. For example, the Demon crossbow can be boosted from 26 to 40 damage to 31 to 45 damage. Normal and exceptional crossbow counterparts can also have their damages increase as well. These damage boosts will then be multiplicative for magic, rare or unique items with enhanced damage on them to hopefully then make crossbows be more on equal footing with bows. Moving on to unique crossbows, the two that need some more love are Hellrack and Gut Siphon. Hellrack is an underwhelming counterpart to the Bowazon. Hellrack lacks both raw damage and that attack speed boost that makes Bowazon great. While we don't need a carbon copy of Bowazon for Hellrack, my suggestion for Hellrack is to increase the number of open sockets it has from 2 to 4 to open up some more potential options for this crossbow. With 4 sockets, you can stick 4 40-15 joules into it for damage and firepower, or stick 4 fire facets into this for higher damage immolation arrow. It still won't be a top tier crossbow, but it would perhaps turn this into something that the more curious Bowazons would at least give a try. For Gut Siphon, I'm really having a hard time seeing what the use case is for this one. It's got slow target and open wounds, but you might as well just use a rip hook bow that has the same things but shoots faster. I think adding some increased attack speed to this crossbow as well as deadly strike will go some way towards helping this crossbow out. This won't make the crossbow GG, but it's at least something. And the last of the uniques to buff, this time a bow, I'll talk about Bloodraven's Charge. For an elite unique bow, Bloodraven's Charge is really lackluster and doesn't really establish its namesake very well, despite having some revive charges. To help this bow better live up to its name, this bow should have the chance to reanimate monsters, much like how Faith works with its skeletons. Except, Bloodraven's Charge should be able to reanimate both skeletons and hungry dead zombies. I was so curious to see what this change would look like, I decided to edit this bow with these suggested mods and try it out. The following endgame itemization suggestions affect rares, magic and crafted items as part of the grind that happens beyond just standard rune words and unique items, and probably doesn't affect casual players all that much, but still might on some level. Anyway, there's a couple of points I wanted to cover here, and those are rare item rerolling and available mods on magic items. With rare item rerolling, this can be done using the cube recipe that uses 6 perfect skulls and a rare item to roll another version of that rare item that has new modifiers on it. There are currently 2 problems with this cube recipe, however. Firstly, 4x2 rare items such as matriarchal bows and grand matron bows can't be re-rolled using this recipe, simply because there's not enough space in the Haragic cube to fit the skulls and the item. And secondly, the recipe doesn't preserve what's called the eye level on that rare item, where the item's eye level dictates what mods can spawn on that item. For this cube recipe, the eye level reduction is not a severely major problem, depending on what mods you're looking for and what character level you're doing the rerolls with. On screen, you can see an example of this where the eye level of the item slowly erodes down to what looks like level 63 based on using a level 95 character. Based on this, certain mods will become unavailable to spawn on the rolled rare item. Those mods are all of the top-end elemental damage prefixes, the of transcendence minimum damage suffix, and the of regeneration suffix. My suggestions to change this cube recipe is to reduce the number of perfect skulls needed from 6 to 4 to allow 4x2 item rerolling, and also to make rare items preserve their eye levels. This way, a Grand Matron bow dropped from Hell Diablo can be re-rolled as many times as you wanted with the chance of all potential desirable mods to roll on it. Moving on to available affixes or mods on magic items. As eye levels increase on items found in higher difficulties, the number of available mods that can spawn on those items increase in number, making it exponentially more difficult to roll a decent rare item. We still regrettably see 20% enhanced damage rolls on rare items found in Acts 4 and 5 in Hell. Despite a rare bow with 400% enhanced damage on it, is still no match compared to a Windforce or a Faith, which arguably are much easier to obtain. Such a rare bow having upwards of 1 in 2 million chance to roll, when Windforce can be traded for quite easily, just doesn't make sense. And this is 1 in 2 million odds, assuming you even find a rare Grand Matron bow or Matriarchal bow, which by themselves are not easy to find anyway. My suggestions to balance this out a bit is to make the game weed out lower level affixes, such as 20% enhanced damage, from being able to spawn on higher eye level items, thus increasing the odds again on rolling higher quality rare items. With this change, rather than a 1 in 2 million chance to roll a rare with decent mods, this can be made to be more like 1 in 600,000 or even 1 in 200,000, with higher eye level rares drop from say Diablo, Nilithak or Bale leaning towards the latter numbers. And this sort of change should not only apply for rare bows, but for any rare weapons in the game. This, together with the cube recipe changes suggested earlier, will make the hunt for rare items a lot more viable, but also make target farming Diablo, Nilithak and Bale more attractive. The last things I want to cover here are some much needed bug fixes to remove some of the more annoying things from the game and things that I think disproportionately affect Bowazon gameplay. Currently, skill bindings get lost when I unequip my arrows or bolts. I will then need to click on the left and on the right to set my left and right skill bindings again, just to reset my skills. This is particularly problematic when you're in the thick of battle and you drop your arrows from your secondary weapon slots to give your primary slot more arrows. I do this in one of my past videos that's currently shown on screen here. This video was taken before patch 2.4, so it wasn't a problem that time. And lastly, there seems to be an issue with name locking in D2R. For those that don't know, name locking is where you target an enemy and hold down your mouse button to continually shoot at them, especially for skills such as Guided Arrow or Fist of the Heavens. At times, the name lock gets removed if my mouse is no longer over the target or if the target dies, which in both cases my Bowazon would move towards the direction of where my mouse is currently positioned. Which is problematic because I'm trying to gun down a target and do not want to move. This is particularly dangerous for a low life build that tries to keep their distance from everything to ensure their safety. I know that I got wiped out from a cold enchanted Frost Nova one time because my Bowazon lost a name lock on the boss that she just killed and then started running towards her cold death. Very frustrating. Anyway, I hope this covers a good breadth of things without this video becoming too long. Please leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Let me know if these are all good ideas or if there are some things that you don't agree with. And as always, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to see more Bowazon content like this in the future. Have a nice day and see you in the next one.